Hi guys, my name is Niv Ashkenazi and this is I for Technique. Today we're going to be talking about Sautillé and looking at it in slow motion. Sautillé is one of the first things that I ever looked at in slow motion, and what I saw very much intrigued me. Even though Sautillé is supposed to be a stroke that stays on the string, it looked to me like I saw my bow hairs leave the string, and that made me wonder what's going on. So this is actually a video that began quite a while ago and has gone through multiple processes. So there's a bit of a story to it. It started back in the summer when I first looked at Sautillé, and then when I started filming this, I really thought that I knew exactly what was happening, and I wanted to share that with you. I was very excited about it. And then when I actually filmed it and looked at it, I realized that maybe I didn't quite know what was going on yet. So instead of giving you conclusions about what is going on, today is going to be more of an exploration of Sautillé with a tilted bow versus Sautillé with a flat bow. So to look at Sautillé, I decided to play a small excerpt of the beginning of Paganini's Moto Perpetuo. Let's give it a listen. Normally on this channel, we've been looking at slow motion clips that are at 1,000 frames per second. But these next couple clips are actually going to be at 500 frames per second, so they're going to be a bit faster. But a bit faster is still about 16 times slower than at the real speed.
So here we can see that the bow is staying on the string, but the left side of the bow, the part closest to us, the bow hairs are coming off the string. It's just the bow hairs on the right side of the bow, the part farthest away from us, are not coming off the string at all. And this is kind of cool because it's not that slow. It's kind of engaging, but we can still see it fluttering, kind of moving to the right. Now, this was when I was doing Sautillé with my bow turned, and the reason that I decided to do a turned bow Sautillé was because it's indicated that this opening is in piano. So I automatically am used to turning my bow whenever there's a piano for the most part, and so I did that and did this kind of Sautillé. Now we're going to see it, the same clip, but from a different angle. And as you can see here, the part that's closest to us is staying completely on the string, as Sautillé is supposed to. But if you look carefully, the part that's further away from us, on the other side, it's rising up and down, and we can kind of see it doing that right now. And that's what was happening when I was doing the Sautillé with my bow turned, which we can see now how turned the stick is. So it was very interesting. On the one hand, the bow is staying on the string. On the other hand, part of the bow hair is actually completely leaving the string. And that kind of makes sense.
So when I was looking over the summer with a not proper slow motion camera, I was seeing some of the things that we saw in these two clips. But it looked to me like the bow hairs were completely leaving the string, not just the part of the bow hairs that were close to the bridge. So that's what got me to start investigating Sautillé. The way Sautillé is usually taught, and the way I was taught it, is that you start with the bow on the string and go back and forth and speed it up until you can feel that the bow wants to jump out of the string, and then you just release a little bit of pressure from your first finger and allow it to bounce by itself. But we're always told that Sautillé should really stay fully on the string. And so it surprised me that there was anything that wasn't on the string. I realized that if my Sautillé was looking like this, other people's Sautillé was probably also looking like this. And so this was incredible to actually get to see on a slow motion camera for the first time. Now let's look at a couple of clips at 1,000 frames per second so that we slow it down and we can see a bit more details. And then I'll talk with you about why this video changed from its original idea.
So here we can see that the bow isn't leaving the string. It really is staying on, and there's small back and forth motion, but parts of the bow are often leaving the string, the parts that are closest to the bridge. So we can see the bow hair really rising, but the part furthest away from the bridge isn't. So we kind of see that wiggle back and forth on each bow stroke. Here it is from the other angle. And here again, we can see that the part closest to our camera angle, furthest away from the bridge, isn't leaving the string at all, and the part that's closest to the bridge is leaving it a little bit. Now, why does this actually make sense, that part of the bow hairs are leaving the string? Well, I think that it helps to actually allow the string to vibrate and for us to get that really great sound that Sautillé gives. If the bow hair had no give, then it wouldn't be as lively a sound when we did Sautillé, and there wouldn't be as much ring to it. So I think actually allowing half of the bow hairs to leave the string is actually very helpful for the sound here when we're doing a tilted Sautillé. Here I decided to take a clip where I went a little bit slower. So this wasn't my fastest Sautillé at 1,000 frames per second. It was a bit slower, and this is where we can see that ripple effect in the bow hair that we were able to see in some of the previous videos also. I honestly find it very mesmerizing to see that ripple. And since it's a little slower, here we do see all the bow hairs leaving the string a little bit more. And I think this has to do with needing that little bit of extra time, since I'm doing a slower Sautillé, to keep that speed steady. So I think that's why the bow hairs left the string. It had to do with the timing, and that we were getting close to a spiccato speed rather than anything else.
So after a day of filming in slow motion on this passage, I suddenly realized that the reason that the bow is leaving the string on only part of it might be because my bow is turned. Now, when I was first taught Sautillé, as I'm sure it was for most people, you were taught that Sautillé is done with a very flat bow because that actually helps to get more bounce. So honestly, I had a mini existential crisis of whether I'm the only person that does Sautillé with a turned bow and I'm the one that's doing technique completely wrong. So I actually asked around and asked some friends. I didn't tell them what I was doing, but I wanted them to check it out. And I even challenged one of my friends to look at this particular piece and asked him how he would do it. Luckily, I found out I'm not the only one that does this. So lots of people do this. Everyone does this. I just hadn't noticed it. And neither had the people that I had asked for the most part, because it was so natural for us that if we want a dolce sound or a piano sound, we just turn our bow. And so, of course, we do Sautillé with a turned bow for those kinds of passages, as with this passage from Paganini. But then my wife, who's a bassoonist, asked me a really good question. What happens if you do this passage with a flat bow? And that's what has led to this video for you guys today. So now we'll review the clip of the Sautillé with the turned bow and immediately follow it with the clip of the Sautillé with a flat bow, and then we'll jump into the slow motion of flat bow Sautillé.
I didn't quite enjoy doing Sautillé with a flat bow for this particular passage when I was trying to get that certain soft sound. Now, what's really interesting that we can see over here is with a flat bow, the bow hairs do leave the string a bit more than before, sometimes all of them. And we don't see as much of the bow hairs leaving the strings that are closer to the bridge. And I'm about to show you why. So in this clip, we're seeing it from the other side, and here we can see that now the bow hairs that are really leaving the strings are the ones that are further away from the bridge. So this is actually the opposite of what we found with the turned bow. Now that makes sense because when we turn the bow, we are on those bow hairs more, and the ones closer to the bridge are more in the air naturally. With the flat bow hair, there isn't that bias towards those bow hairs. So instead, the bow hairs that are further away from the bridge are the ones that are leaping up higher than the ones closer to the bridge. Now, as you can see, my bow hairs aren't always leaving the string, but I'm also having more times where all the bow hairs are leaving the string than when I had a tilted bow. So again, I found this interesting. to see what's actually going on with the sautillé. And I think that the bow hairs leaving the string isn't such a bad thing. It just allows for more sound production. But for me as a player, I'm still thinking of my sautillé as being on the string. Functionally, when I try to play, I'm trying to play on the string and just letting the bow naturally bounce. So whether it stays on the string completely, partially lifts, or fully lifts, it doesn't really matter all that much when it comes to the way I'm thinking about the technique itself when I'm playing.
So, as we saw with the bow actually does bounce off the string more than when it is a turned bow sautillé. Some observations also as a player, not just from me, but also from friends that tried this, is in this particular section, it felt much harder to control the flat bowed sautillé. It really just wanted to jump off the string, and it was hard to actually get that really nice dolce sound. In other passages, I'm sure I'm going to use flat bows sautillé, but in this situation, I really do think that doing a turned bow sautillé makes sense for the musical passage. As part of my mini existential crisis, I also looked all over YouTube for recordings of great violinists. And what I found was very interesting. What I found was the music really came first. Some of them were doing all sorts of varying techniques related to sautillé that weren't necessarily even 100% sautillé. Maybe some were more on the strings, some were more off the strings, some were faster, some were slower. But really, it was all about the music first. And I think that that's actually a really good point when we talk about violin technique in general. So much of what we do does kind of overlap between different techniques. So it's really good to be able to define what technique we're doing, but it's also really important to be able to just use our skills to get the sounds that we want. One friend, when I continued grilling him about this subject, even asked me, "Why do you care so much about this?" And I mean, the answer is I'm the one that started a channel where I want to look at the specifics of violin technique and really define it with slow motion. So I think that's just the type of person that I am. But also, another comment from one of my friends was, why even do it as sautillé for this? Why not just play it on the string completely? So basically, to each their own when it comes to this. But I still think it's fascinating to go down a rabbit hole of exploring sautillé with a turned bow, with a flat bow, and kind of seeing all the different variety in between.